Um, I wanted to do a BBC on a topic that somebody wrote to me. Somebody wrote to me about. They were, asking about how to resolve this in their project, in their practice. So I thought to share a little bit of it with you. So this person says, "I am stuck in my head." Anybody ever feel that? "I cannot seem to find a way out of my conceptual mind. My Dharma practice, my life actually, is dominated by analysis and intellectual grasping, whether I'm studying or meditating. I try to tap into my intuition, my heart, my innate wisdom, but I always end up thinking and analyzing and understanding and explaining." Oh, somebody's resonating with this. Um, What can I do to teach my mind to drop this bad habit of intellectual grasping? I'm afraid to even touch a Dharma book these days because I always end up studying and intellectualizing. Is it simply a matter of dropping the study books for a while and focusing on calming meditation, mantra recitation, prostrations, the more non-conceptual practices, so to speak? Meaning that they are, in a way, less inviting to intellectual grasping. How do you manage at Sravasti as Geluk practitioners steeped in philosophy to not be in your heads the whole time? First of all, being a Geluk practitioner doesn't mean that you're steeped in philosophy all the time, okay? We also do purification practices, we do devotional practices and visualizations, we do a lot of thought training meditation, Lam Rim meditation, so it isn't always studying philosophy. Sometimes these images of the different Tibetan traditions I find quite laughable. One time, many years ago, I gave a talk somewhere in North Carolina, I think it was, and I think it was at a Kargu Center, and somebody came up to me at the end of that talk and said, "Wow, you're a Galupa, but you couldn't have given that talk if you didn't practice." Yeah, like, Galupas don't practice, they just philosophize and study, but you couldn't have given that talk unless you practiced. So it didn't meet her stereotype of what Galupas did, okay? So, whatever tradition you follow, yeah, and this goes across the whole landscape of Buddhist traditions, we can get stuck in our head doing a lot of intellectual blah blah. Yeah, and this sometimes it starts at the beginning because we're so eager to learn so much. We want to get all the Dharma at once that we read one book after another book after another book, and we don't spend time really thinking about what we read. We're just trying to get a lot of information, and after a while, then you lose touch with applying that information to your own life and your own heart. So that's why I always tell people when they read Dharma books, read slowly and then put the book down and think about what you read and think about your life in context of what you read. It's, Dharma study is not about gaining lots of information. It's about gaining tools to understand our own mind. But sometimes it does happen that we feel like we're kind of stuck in our practice. Even we're trying to apply things to our mind, somehow nothing much is happening. And in those situations, it's very helpful to increase the preliminary practices that we're doing. In other words, to do more prostrations, mandala offerings, the 7-limb prayer, to work more on visualizations, imagining the Buddha and making requests and the light coming from the Buddha into us, purifying and increasing our our bodhicitta and our wisdom and bringing all the good qualities and so forth. So those kinds of practices work with a different part of our mind. They we have the study, and that helps us to understand the Dharma, and then we open our mind to really having convictional faith in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. In other words, a kind of faith or inspiration or trust or confidence that comes not out of blindness, but out of understanding. But it's more on the emotional side of our mind, where we feel a real connection to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Yeah. And so, for example, when we visualize the Buddha and think of the Buddha's qualities, and then we have a little dialogue with the Buddha, like, for example, when we're purifying, okay? We don't just sit there when we're purifying and go, okay, I purify 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 18, 102, 103. You know, that's not what we do. But you actually kind of have a conversation with the Buddha. And it's like, okay, I'm revealing these things that I've done that I don't feel good about having done. I really want to leave behind the karmic imprints. I want to change the way that I'm acting, and I need some inspiration and invigoration. And then, you have this conversation with the Buddha, or you're having some problem. You're losing your temper a lot, or you're having a lot of attachment and desire come up. And you say to the Buddha, in your meditation, what do I do? Help me. And then that helps you remember the teachings that are the antidotes for that particular affliction that you're drowning in at that moment. And so you apply those antidotes to calm your mind down. And then, when you're doing the prostrations or reciting the mantra or whatever, then the Buddha's radiating light into you. So that's all done on an emotional level. It's using symbolism, it's using art, I mean, when you visualize the Buddha, you're taking the qualities that you may have studied about in a book and imagining how those qualities manifest in a physical appearance. Yeah, because each aspect of a Buddha, each aspect of a deity is representative of some enlightened quality. Yeah. So we're working with symbolism in a different part of our mind, which is very, very helpful because we can't just sit there and study all the time. Our mind does get stuck if we try and do that, and if we're just trying to cram in a lot of information. So this part of really establishing a personal relationship with the three jewels, done through the visualization, through the different practices that we do, Chenrezi, Tara, Medicine Buddha, these kinds of things, or doing prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, purifying with Vajrasattva, offering the mandala, thinking of everything beautiful in the universe and offering it to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then you do it again and again and again and again, until all of your greed and attachment is exhausted because you've given everything that you're attached to the Buddha multiple times. Okay? So these practices work on that more gut level. I don't know what the word is. So in our daily practice, we should have a balance of both, understanding things to develop wisdom and doing these more devotional or artistic practices so that our mind stays balanced. But once in a while, it gets out of whack. And so then we have to emphasize one thing more than the other. Yeah. And if sometimes our mind is just too much, you've just been studying really hard and taken an exam, then maybe you need to put all that down and really do some kind of retreat where you're really letting your mind relax and looking into distance and just focusing on your breath, on the visualized image of the Buddha, whatever, to kind of calm the mind, relax the mind, open it up, and make it more receptive. So I think all of this is part of learning how to become a doctor to our own mind. Yeah, knowing how to see when we're out of balance and then do what we need to do to rebalance in our practice. Okay. Lots of people say to me, "Oh, I do the emptiness meditation, and I go through the 4-point analysis, but it doesn't do anything." Yeah. Um, well, part of that could be because we really need to spend more time just looking at our own mind and getting to know our own mind. Because the first of the 4 points is identifying the object of negation. In other words, identifying, the object that the self-grasping ignorance believes exists. And we're so out of touch with ourselves that we don't even recognize it when it's there. Okay? So, this takes time to do. And it takes getting to know our mind and watching our mind and knowing our mind shenanigans. Yeah? And all its trips and all its hallucinations and made up rubbish, you know. And so we have to get to know the landscape like this and have some acceptance of it. And then we can start applying the different antidotes. But this takes some time, We're not going to sit down and do the emptiness meditation and go, wow, I got it. Yeah. We should try working on impermanence first. That's easier. Or the nature of dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. That's easier to realize than emptiness. But we don't like thinking about that, so we skip over that. Um, but it's really helpful to do these other meditations and get to know our mind better.